The Last Keeper of Brynmoor. Chapter 1. The Condemned Village. The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday, plastered to every door in Brynmoor like wanted posters in an old western. Compulsory purchase order, it screamed in bureaucratic capitals. Residents must vacate by December 31st. Demolition to commence January 15th. I remember standing in the village square. If you could call it that. Just a worn patch of cobblestones with a crooked Celtic cross in the middle. Watching Mrs. Pritchard tear hers down and crumple it into her shopping bag. She was crying, but quietly, the way Welsh people do. Like she didn't want to disturb anyone with her grief. I wasn't crying. At 23, I suppose I thought I was beyond sentimentality. I'd only moved to Brynmoor 6 months earlier, renting old Gwilym Thomas's spare room for £90 a week, because it was all I could afford after university. And because the rural internet was surprisingly decent for my remote data entry job. The village was dying anyway. Everyone said so. 12 permanent residents, most of them over 70. No shop, no pub anymore, just a cluster of stone cottages clinging to a hillside in Carmarthenshire, like stubborn barnacles. The reservoir would be beautiful, the council promised. A haven for wildlife. Economic opportunities. The future. But that Tuesday, watching the November rain darken the ancient stones, all I could think was, this place has survived since the Dark Ages, and we're drowning it for a water park. They've no right. A voice said behind me. I turned to find Gwilym. All 6 feet of him despite being 84, his white hair plastered to his skull by the drizzle. He wasn't looking at me but at the cross. Its worn carvings barely visible after 15 centuries of Welsh weather. They have every right, I said. Probably too sharply. They're paying fair market value. More than these houses are worth, honestly. His blue eyes, startlingly clear for a man his age, fixed on me then. Market value, he repeated, as if I'd spoken in Mandarin. And what's the market value of memory, Tom? Of knowing? What's the going rate for that? I shrugged. Uncomfortable. Gwilym had a way of asking questions that felt like accusations. You think I'm a daft old man, he said. Not unkindly. Standing in the rain, mourning a pile of stones. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. He smiled, but it was sad. Tell me something. Why did you come here? To Brynmoor? Of all places. Young man like you. Cheap rent, I said. Quiet. Good internet. Bollocks. The profanity sounded almost gentle in his accent. You came because you were looking for something. Same as everyone who washes up in places like this. Running from something, looking for something. Usually the same thing, if you think about it. He wasn't wrong, but I wasn't about to admit it. After the disaster of my final year, the failed dissertation, the collapsed relationship, the general sense that I'd peaked at 19 and been declining ever since, Brynmoor had seemed like a place to hide. Or hibernate, maybe. Wait for life to make sense again. I'm the last keeper, Gwilym said suddenly. Did you know that? Keeper of what? Everything. He gestured vaguely at the village, the hills, the leaden sky. The customs. The stories. The old ways. Every village used to have one. Centuries back. Someone who remembered. Passed it all down, mouth to ear, generation to generation. But the chain's broken now. Everyone else who knew. They're gone. And come January, Brynmoor goes with them. So write it down, I suggested. Make a record. Historical Society would probably love it. He laughed, a sound like rocks tumbling. Written down. You sound like those council archaeologists who came poking about last month. We'll document everything, they said. Photographic survey. As if you can photograph a memory. As if you can file away 700 years of knowing, under miscellaneous rural heritage, and call it preserved. I felt a flash of irritation. So what's your plan? Stand here and let it all die with you? That's really preserving it. Maybe, he said quietly. Or maybe I could teach someone. If anyone cared to learn. The rain was getting heavier. I was cold and wet and I wanted to go inside, make tea, disappear into my spreadsheets where everything was quantifiable, and nothing required me to feel anything in particular. I have to get back to work, I said. Gwilym nodded, unsurprised. Course you do. He started to turn away, then paused. But if you change your mind, if you want to know what's really being lost here, my door's open. For the next 46 days, anyway. He walked off toward his cottage, moving with that strange spry stiffness of very old people who refuse to acknowledge their age. I watched him go, telling myself I didn't care, that it was none of my business, that I had my own problems without taking on the nostalgic delusions of an elderly man, who couldn't accept that the world had moved on. I believed that for almost 3 whole days. Chapter 2. The First Lessons. I knocked on Gwilym's door on Friday evening, telling myself it was just curiosity. Boredom. Something to do in a village where the most exciting event of the week was Mrs. Pritchard's cat catching a vole. Wondered how long you'd last, Gwilym said, standing aside to let me in. Tea? His cottage was exactly what you'd expect. Low ceilings, exposed beams, a fireplace that looked original to the building. Which, given Brynmoor's age, meant it had been drawing smoke for the better part of a millennium. But it was also surprisingly tidy. Lined with bookshelves that sagged under the weight of volumes in Welsh and English. Everything from agricultural manuals to poetry collections. So, I said, accepting a mug of tea so strong it could strip paint. What is it you want to teach me, exactly? Gwilym settled into a wing-backed chair that had molded itself to his shape over decades. Everything, he said simply. But we haven't got time for that, have we? So we'll start with what matters most. The things that make Brynmoor what it is. Was. The customs. Like what? Morris dancing? I regretted the flippancy immediately. But Gwilym just smiled. Morris dancing's English, bark. Different beast entirely. No, I'm talking about the real old things. The boundary walk. The well blessing. The bonfires. Wait, bonfires? Bonfire, he said, drawing out the word. That's where your modern word comes from. We used to burn bones at Samhain. All Hallows Eve to you. To honor the dead and keep the worst of the spirits at bay. Not anymore, course. Health and safety. His eyes twinkled. Though I may have bent that particular rule a time or two when I was younger. I sipped my tea, trying to get my head around this. And you actually believe in this stuff? Spirits and, doesn't matter what I believe, Gwilym interrupted. Matters what the customs mean. The why of them. Take the boundary walk. We do it every May Day, walk the old parish boundaries. You think that's superstition? Isn't it? It's land rights, boy. Time immemorial. That's what they call it in law. You can prove you've been doing something a certain way for long enough, you've got rights. That's what the walk preserves. Proves the boundaries haven't changed. And the well blessing. You know we've got 7 springs in Brynmoor? 7 sources of fresh water, never run dry, not in the worst drought. That's wealth, that is. Real wealth. And the custom reminds everyone. This water's shared. Belongs to all of us. Can't be bought or sold. I set down my mug. But it is being bought. The whole valley is. Gwilym said softly. They're buying what they don't understand. Can't understand, because nobody remembers anymore. He leaned forward. Here's what I want to teach you, Tom. Not just the what, But the why? Not just the customs, but the reasons. The logic of it. So when this place is 40 feet underwater, and all that's left is photographs and survey documents, at least one person will know. Will really know. But why me? I asked. Why not someone local, someone who? There is no one local, Gwilym said. Not who'd listen. I've got 2 nephews, both in Cardiff, both in finance. Think I'm a relic. Mrs. Pritchard's daughter wanted her in a home 5 years ago. The Morgans. They're already gone, to move in with their son in Bristol. It's you or nobody, Bach. You or the water. The fire popped and settled. Outside, I could hear the wind picking up. That particular Welsh wind that sounds like it's keening for something lost. All right, I said. Teach me. Gwilym's face split into a grin that took 20 years off him. Good man. Now, first thing you need to understand. Every custom's got a season. We're coming into winter now. Into the dark time. So we'll start with the dark customs. The ones about death and memory. Cheerful stuff. He winked. Fetch me that red notebook from the second shelf, would you? Time to begin. That night, I filled 12 pages of my own notebook with Gwilym's words. The winter customs of Brynmoor. The candle vigil on the winter solstice. Every window lit from dusk to dawn, a thread of light through the longest night. The memory feast on December 20th. A communal meal where you had to tell a story about someone who'd died. Not sad, Gwilym insisted, never sad. Funny, ideally, or strange. Anything that kept them vivid and real. The threshold sweeping on New Year's Eve. Out with the old year's dust, in with the new year's luck. Though personally, Gwilym said, I think it's just an excuse to make sure you clean at least once a year. You'll help me with the solstice, Gwilym said as I was leaving. Near midnight. Can't do all those candles myself anymore. Dodgy knees. The solstice is in 3 weeks, I pointed out. We'll be packing by then. All the more reason, Gwilym said. Last chance to do it right. I should have said no. Should have pointed out the futility of it. Instead, I found myself nodding. All right. I'll help. Walking back to my room in his cottage. I rented the converted loft. I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not quite purpose, but adjacent to it. Like I was part of something. Even if that something was ending. In my notebook, in the margin next to Memory Feast, I'd written, he's not trying to preserve the past. He's trying to prevent it from being erased. I wasn't sure there was a difference, but I was starting to think maybe there was. Chapter 3. The Boundary and the Bone Box. We'll walk the bounds, Gwilym announced the next morning. Far too early for a Saturday. Can't teach you proper without you knowing the shape of the place. It's November, I protested. Still in my pajamas. It's freezing. It's Wales, he countered. It's always freezing. Dress warm. An hour later. We set out from the village cross. Gwilym moving with surprising speed for a man who claimed dodgy knees. He carried a staff. Not for support, I realized, but for pointing. Boundary walk starts here, always, he said, tapping the cross's base. And goes clockwise, following the sun. Daysel, we call it in Welsh. The right way round. Everything important goes daysel. We climbed up the eastern hill. Gwilym naming every field, every stone, every twisted hawthorn tree. That's Kymore. Big field, unimaginative name, but there you go. That stone with the hole in it. That's Main Mui. Oath stone. Time was, you made a promise before witnesses, you did it there. Put your hands through the hole and spoke your piece. Binding, that was. Did you ever? I asked. Make an oath there, Once, he said, not elaborating. We walked for hours, tracing a rough circle around Brynmoor. Gwilym showed me the marker stones. Some carved, some natural. That defined the parish. He pointed out where the old paths ran, most of them now lost under bracken and bramble. He knew every spring, every ancient tree, every place where something significant had happened. That's where Einon Davis's cow fell through the ice, 1947, he said, pointing to a frozen-over ditch. Dead of winter, a harsh one. We managed to get her out. That's where Megan Parry saw her first rainbow, 1959. She told me about it 60 years later, month before she died. Said she'd never forgotten it. That's where I kissed Bethan Hughes for the first time, 1963. A pause. And the last time, 1964. She married someone else. I was starting to understand. The landscape wasn't just geography to Gwilym. It was memory made solid. Every inch of it meant something. Connected to something. Part of an unbroken story. When they flood it, I said quietly, all this disappears. Not disappears, Gwilym corrected. It'll still be there, under the water. But disconnected. Drowned. Same as the memories, really. He looked at me. That's what you're preserving, Tom. Not just the customs, but this. The knowing of place. The stories in the land. We stopped for lunch at the western boundary, sitting on a stone wall that Gwilym claimed was Bronze Age. Probably older than anything else you'll sit on today, he said cheerfully. Unwrapping sandwiches he'd prepared. Cheese and pickle, very precisely cut. Can I ask you something? I said. Why didn't you marry? After Bethan, I mean. Gwilym was quiet for a long moment. Did, actually. Angharad Thomas. No relation. Good woman. We had 15 years before the cancer took her. No children, though. We tried. He ate his sandwich contemplatively. Sometimes I wonder if that's why I'm the last keeper. If I'd had kids, grandkids, maybe one of them would have cared. But then I think, probably not. World's different now. Can't blame them for living in it. We finished the circuit as the afternoon light was failing, arriving back at the cross as the first stars appeared. Traditional to leave an offering, Gwilym said. Nothing fancy. Just a token that you've completed the walk, kept the boundary alive in memory one more year. He pulled a small stone from his pocket. Smooth, grey, unremarkable. And placed it at the cross's base. I noticed, looking down, there were dozens of similar stones there, half buried in the dirt. All yours? I asked. 62 years worth, he confirmed. Miss a year, the tradition breaks. So I haven't missed. He handed me a stone. Your turn. I placed it next to his, feeling oddly ceremonial about it. Right, Gwilym said. Now for the interesting bit. There's something I need to show you. Something I've been putting off, truth be told. Back at his cottage. He led me to a cupboard under the stairs and extracted a wooden box. Perhaps 2 feet long, intricately carved with patterns that looked Celtic. The bone box, he said, setting it on the table with surprising reverence. Every keeper maintains one. Has done since. Well, nobody quite knows. Before records, anyway. What's in it? I asked. Half afraid of the answer. Open it. I lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in faded cloth, were dozens of objects. A tarnished silver thimble. A military medal. A child's tooth. A lock of hair tied with ribbon. A photograph so old it was on glass. A wedding ring. A piece of flint, napped into a crude blade. Letters in Welsh, the ink brown with age. These are from people who lived here, Gwilym explained. Some from centuries ago, some recent. Each keeper adds to it. Things people wanted remembered. Things that mattered. That medal belonged to David Morris, died at Ypres, 1917. The thimble was his mother's. She sewed shirts for the whole village, never charged a penny. The tooth was from little Rhys Evans, first baby born in Brynmoor after the war. He's 70 now, living in Australia. The photograph. He lifted it carefully. That's the original village school, 1880. Building's long gone, but there she is. I felt an unexpected lump in my throat. What happens to it? To the box? When? When the waters come. Gwilym smiled sadly. That's your job, Tom. As the new keeper. You take it. Keep it safe. Add to it. Maybe. If you find things worth remembering. Pass it on someday. If you can find someone to pass it to. I'm not a keeper, I protested. I'm just some guy who. You're the one who came back, Gwilym interrupted. You're the one who's listening. That's all a keeper is, really. Someone who listens. Someone who remembers. Someone who cares enough to carry it forward, even when it seems pointless. He closed the box gently, his old hands careful on the carved wood. Take it home tonight, he said. Look through it properly. Read the letters if you can puzzle out the Welsh. Get to know them, these people. Because after January, you'll be the only person left who does. I carried the box up to my room like it was full of nitroglycerin. That night, instead of watching Netflix or scrolling my phone, I went through every item, handling each one carefully, trying to imagine the lives they represented. The child's tooth. The soldier's medal. The photograph of serious-faced children in front of a stone building that no longer existed. At the bottom, I found something that made me catch my breath. A small notebook. The writing spidery and faded. Dated 1893. The previous keeper's journal. I stayed up until 3 in the morning reading it. My Welsh dictionary app working overtime. It was all there. The customs, the stories, the same sense of trying to hold something together as the world changed. The young people leave for the coal mines, one entry read. They'll not come back. But we must remember for them, so when they're old, they'll know what they came from. The same story, different century. Same ending coming, just taking longer to arrive. I texted Gwilym at 3:17 a.m. I'll do it. I'll be the keeper. Properly, I mean. His reply came 30 seconds later. Good. Sleep now. Tomorrow we prepare for the solstice. And Tom. Thank you. I lay in bed, the bone box on my desk. And for the first time since moving to Brynmoor, I didn't feel like I was hiding. I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. Chapter 4. The Candle Vigil. We had 19 days until the solstice, and Gwilym became a man possessed. We need candles, he announced at breakfast. Hundreds of them. Every window in every cottage. All night. Can't do it with battery lights. Wouldn't be right. There are only 12 houses, I pointed out. And half of them are already empty. Then we'll light those too, Gwilym said firmly. Last vigil deserves to be done proper. Over the next week, we became an unlikely double act, knocking on doors throughout Brynmoor. Mrs. Pritchard wept and agreed immediately, pressing a tin of her shortbread into our hands. The Morgans, who hadn't actually left yet, said they'd been planning to skip out early but would stay for this. Even the Hughes twins, surly teenagers whose parents had decamped to Swansea but left them to finish packing, grudgingly agreed to help. Why do you care? The girl, Bronwyn, asked me directly. You're not even from here. I found I didn't have a good answer. Or rather, I had too many answers. None of them simple. Someone should, I finally said. She considered this, then nodded. Fair enough. Gwilym taught me the logic of the vigil as we worked. Winter solstice. Longest night of the year. Death of the sun. Near enough. People used to be terrified the light wouldn't come back. So you make light yourself. You keep the vigil. You prove you're not giving in to the dark. But you know the sun comes back, I said. We have astronomy now. Knowing's not the same as feeling, Gwilym replied. In your head, you know everything will be fine. But in your bones? In the dark, at 3 a.m., when the night feels eternal? That's when you need the candles. That's when you need to remember you're not alone in the darkness. We sourced candles from everywhere. Tesco, Amazon, even raiding Mrs. Pritchard's legendary hoard in her shed. For emergencies, she explained. Tea lights, pillar candles, tapers. We needed hundreds. And somehow, we got them. The night before the solstice, Gwilym held an impromptu gathering in his cottage. All 12 remaining residents of Brynmoor, plus the Hughes twins, crammed into his front room. Tomorrow's our last solstice, Gwilym said without preamble. Last time we'll do this together. Last time these walls will see it. So I want to do it right. Traditional. Which means. He paused for effect. We tell the stories. There was a tradition, he explained, that on the solstice eve, you shared a story about light in darkness. Could be anything. A time you were helped. A time you found hope. A time you saw beauty in a hard place. Mrs. Pritchard went first, telling about her husband getting lost on the hills in 1985, how the whole village had turned out with torches to search, how they'd found him sheltering in a shepherd's hut, freezing but alive. 40 people, she said softly. Everyone we had. All with lights, calling his name. I'll never forget seeing them spread out across the valley. Like stars come down to earth. The stories went round. Some funny, some sad, all of them illuminating something about the people telling them. When it came to me, I surprised myself. I was 17, I said. My dad left. Just left. One day there, next day gone. Mum fell apart, my sister was too young to understand. I felt like I was drowning in it. In the awfulness. And then my mate Jack. We weren't even that close. He just showed up. Every day after school for 2 months. Didn't try to fix anything, didn't say much. Just showed up. Played FIFA. Made me eat. Existed at me until I felt less alone. I swallowed hard. I never thanked him properly. But that was light in darkness for me. Someone just being there. Gwilym nodded slowly. That's what the vigil is, he said. Being there. Showing up. Keeping the light going even when it seems pointless. The next evening, as darkness fell on the shortest day, we began. Every window in every cottage lit. Gwilym had mapped it all out. Which houses needed how many candles, where to place them for maximum effect, how to do it safely. No curtains near flames, for God's sake. Let's not burn down the village before the council gets a chance to drown it. I was in charge of the empty cottages, moving from room to room with boxes of tea lights, placing them on sills, on tables, anywhere they'd cast their glow. It was eerie. Lighting up abandoned homes. Seeing the shadows jump and dance in rooms that would never be lived in again. By 7 p.m., Brynmoor glowed. Every window, every cottage, filled with candlelight. From the village cross, it looked like something from a fairy tale. A circle of light against the Welsh darkness. Warm and alive and defiant. We gathered at the cross. All of us. Muffled in coats and scarves. Someone, the Hughes twins, surprisingly, had brought thermoses of hot chocolate. We stood in silence, watching the candles burn, and I understood. This wasn't about superstition or nostalgia. This was about witness. About saying we were here. We mattered. We made light in the darkness. And for this one night, we refused to let that be forgotten. "Tom," Gwilym said quietly, appearing at my elbow. "Look." I followed his gaze. People were coming up the road. Maybe 20 of them. With flashlights and lanterns. Former residents, I realized. People who'd heard about the Vigil. Who'd driven from Carmarthen, from Swansea, from farther. To be here. "Word gets round," Gwilym said, grinning. They joined us at the cross. These ghosts of Brynmoor passed. And someone started singing. A Welsh carol I half recognized. Low and haunting. Others joined in. And even though I didn't know the words, I hummed along, my breath clouding in the freezing air. We kept vigil until dawn, taking turns to check the candles, to replace ones that gutted out, to keep the light burning. I must have walked the circle of cottages a dozen times that night. And each time, seeing those windows glow, I felt something fierce and protective surge in my chest. This matters, I thought. Even if it ends. Even if it's forgotten. Right now, it matters. The sun rose at 8:04 a.m., pale and cold but undeniably there. We cheered. Exhausted and freezing and absolutely triumphant. "Last one," Mrs. Pritchard said. Tears streaming down her weathered face. "Last solstice vigil." "No," Gwilym said firmly. He looked at me. "Tom will keep it. Wherever he goes. Won't you, Mark?" And I heard myself say, "Yes. I will." I meant it. Chapter 5. The Memory Feast. By mid-December, the village was a patchwork of packed boxes and empty rooms. The Morgans left on the 10th, promising to return for one last thing. Mrs. Pritchard would leave with her daughter on the 28th. The deadline was crawling closer, inevitable as the tide. Gwilym seemed to age a year every day. Not physically. He was still spry, still sharp. But in his eyes, like something was dimming. "Memory Feast is on the 20th, he reminded me, as if I could forget. "Need to organize it. Last proper meal in Brynmoor." We turned his cottage into command central. Invitations went out. Handwritten, because Gwilym insisted. To anyone who'd ever lived in Brynmoor. "Tell them to bring food," Gwilym instructed. "Traditional stuff, if they've got it. And a story. That's the price of admission. A memory of someone who's gone." I worried no one would come. I shouldn't have. On December 20th, they arrived in waves. Former residents, their children, their grandchildren. People who'd left decades ago, drawn back for this final gathering. Someone set up trestle tables in the village hall. A glorified shed, really. But it had a working heater. Food appeared. Cawl, barrabrith, Welsh cakes, a lamb roast that Mrs. Pritchard must have spent days on. By 6 p.m., there was 70 people crammed into a space meant for 30. And it was perfect. Gwilym stood. With effort, I noticed. And called for quiet. "The rule of the memory feast," he said, his voice carrying despite his age, "is simple. Before you eat, you tell a story. About someone from Brynmoor who's died. Anyone. Family, friend, neighbor. But it has to be true, and it has to remind us who they were. Not how they died. Mind. How they lived." He sat down, nodded to Mrs. Pritchard. She stood. Flustered but determined. "My Gareth," she said. He couldn't sing to save his life. Tone deaf, absolutely hopeless. But every Sunday, there he'd be in chapel, singing louder than anyone, completely oblivious. Father Rees once said it was like having an enthusiastic foghorn in the congregation. Laughter rippled through the room. But Gareth didn't care. He said singing was for joy, not for perfection. And he had more joy than anyone I've known. Story after story unfolded. Funny, sad, strange, mundane. A man who could predict weather by his bunions. A woman who'd kept bees and talked to them like children. A child who'd died of diphtheria in 1918 but had, in his 5 years, memorized every bird in the valley. They weren't elegant eulogies. They were memories, rough-edged and real. And they built into something larger. A portrait of a community, of lives interconnected. Of the complex web of being that had made Brynmoor what it was. When my turn came, I stood shakily. I didn't know anyone who died here, I admitted. But I've been learning. Gwilym's been teaching me. I pulled out the bone box. I'd brought it, unsure why, but now it felt right. There's a medal in here. David Morris. Died in Flanders, 1917. I've been researching him. He was 23. My age. He wrote letters home about the mud. About missing Welsh rain. About wanting to hear the village bell again. He never did. But he existed. He mattered. And even though everyone who knew him personally is gone, his story isn't. Not while someone remembers it. I sat down, mortified by how emotional I'd gotten. But Gwilym reached over and squeezed my shoulder. The stories continued for hours. We ate between them, passing dishes, sharing food, the room warm with bodies and memories and something that felt like defiant love. Near midnight, a young woman I didn't recognize stood. She was maybe 30, well-dressed, London accent. "I'm Emma," she said. "My grandmother was Megan Parry. She left Brynmoor in 1962, moved to London, married my grandfather. She died last year. But she talked about this place constantly. Especially at the end, when the dementia took most everything else. She'd forgotten my name, forgotten where she lived. But she could still describe every stone of Brynmoor. The rainbow she saw in '59. The taste of her mother's bara wreath. The sound of the bells." Emma's voice cracked. "When I heard about the flooding, about this feast, I had to come. To see it. To tell you." She never forgot. Even when she forgot everything else, she remembered this place. It was her foundation. And I'm glad I came. Because now I'll remember too. I'll remember what she remembered. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Gwilym stood one last time. "That's what this is for," he said simply. "The carrying forward. Megan's granddaughter carries her memory. Tom carries David Morris's story. We all carry each other. In ways we don't even realize. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all we can hope for. To be carried forward, in memory, in story, in the habits and thoughts of people who come after." He raised his glass of definitely non-traditional supermarket wine. "To Brynmoor. To all who lived here. To all who'll remember. To Brynmoor," we echoed, and drank. The feast wound down slowly. People hugged, exchanged numbers, promised to stay in touch. The Londoners drifted away first. Then the Cardiff contingent. Until it was just the core group. The 12 of us who still lived here, plus a handful of diehards. Gwilym sat by the dying heater, looking utterly exhausted and utterly content. "Good feast," he said to me. "The best," I agreed. "Think you can do it again? Wherever you end up?" "I'll try. That's all anyone can do, Bart. Try. Remember. Pass it on." I helped him walk home through the December cold, the stars viciously bright above us. At his door, he paused. "I'm proud of you," he said. "You know that?" Came here lost, you did. Running from something. But you found something too. Purpose, maybe. Connection. The knowing of things. I learned from the best, I said. Daft old man, you mean? But he smiled. Sleep well, Tom. Big days ahead. I watched him go inside, and I felt it. The passing of something. A torch being handed over in the darkness. I was the keeper now. Whether I wanted to be or not. Chapter 6. The Breaking. On December 27th, Gwilym fell. I found him at the base of his stairs. Conscious but dazed. His leg twisted at an angle that made my stomach lurch. Dodgy knees finally gave out, he said through gritted teeth. Typical timing. The ambulance took 40 minutes to arrive. Rural Wales, end of December. They took him to Carmarthen Hospital, and I followed in my battered Fiesta, my hands shaking on the wheel. Broken hip. The doctor, who looked impossibly young, like about 12, explained it with practiced sympathy. Surgery needed. Recovery time. Months. Possibly a care facility afterward. I need to be home by the 31st. Gwilym said from his hospital bed. Fuzzy with painkillers but adamant. Final day. Need to be there. Mr. Thomas. The doctor said gently. You won't be walking for weeks. I'm sorry. I sat with him until visiting hours ended, watching him stare at the ceiling with an expression I'd never seen before. Defeat. You'll do the threshold sweeping, he said finally. New Year's Eve. Last thing before we lock the doors. Of course, I said. And you've got the bone box safe? In my room. I'm not leaving it. Good lad. His eyes closed. Sorry, Tom. Wanted to be there at the end. See it through proper. You already did, I told him. You taught me everything. That's seeing it through. But driving back to Brynmoor in the dark, I felt the weight of it. The responsibility. The loss. The sheer impossibility of doing this without him. The village felt different when I arrived. Emptier somehow. Even though only one person was missing. The next few days were a blur of packing and logistics. Mrs. Pritchard left on the 28th, sobbing into my shoulder before her daughter drove her away. The Hughes twins departed on the 29th, their parents having finally materialized to collect them. By the 30th, it was just me rattling around in Gwilym's cottage, surrounded by boxes and memories. I visited him daily. He was improving physically but fading in other ways, as if being separated from Brynmoor was draining something essential. Tell me about the threshold sweeping, he'd say. And I'd recite what he taught me. Start at the back of the house, sweep forward, out the front door. Symbolic cleansing. Old Year's dust, New Year's luck. Don't sweep anything back inside. Let it go. And you'll say the words? I'll say them. I'd written them phonetically in my notebook, the Welsh blessing he'd taught me. I'd practiced until my accent was at least recognizable. On December 31st, I woke at dawn in the empty cottage. This was it. The last day. Eviction was midnight. Ceremonial really, since everyone was already gone. But the council had been clear. After midnight, Brynmoor officially ceased to exist as an inhabited place. I spent the morning doing a final walk of the boundaries. Alone this time. Placing a stone at each marker. Saying goodbye to Kai Moor and Main Mui, and every inch of land Gwilym had taught me to know. The valley was silent except for wind and distant sheep. And I let myself cry a bit. There. Where no one could see. Back at the cottage, I began the packing in earnest. My own stuff was already boxed. I was moving to a flat share in Swansea, had a new job starting in February. Life moving forward whether I wanted it to or not. But Gwilym's things required care. His books, his papers, his life's accumulation of meaning. At 4 p.m., my phone rang. The hospital. "Mr. Thomas is insisting on speaking with you," the nurse said, exasperated. "He's getting agitated." They put him through. "Tom." His voice was strained. "What time is it there?" 4. "Why?" "Sun sets at 4:30. You need to do something for me. Something important. Anything. Go to the cross. There's a loose stone on the eastern side, about knee height. It'll come out if you wiggle it. Behind it, there's a tin. Fetch it." I was already moving. "What's in it?" "You'll see." "But Tom." "Don't open it until sunset. And when you do." He paused. "Trust me, Bach. Just trust me." I found the stone exactly where he described, worked it loose with cold fingers. Behind it, wrapped in layers of plastic and cloth, was a small tobacco tin, rusted but intact. "Got it," I reported. "Good." He sounded relieved. "Now listen. At sunset, open it. You'll find a key and instructions. Follow them exactly. Do this for me, Tom. Do this for Brynmoor." "Gwilym, what?" But he'd hung up, or the nurse had taken the phone. I was left standing at the cross, holding a mysterious tin, watching the winter sun slide toward the horizon. At exactly 4:30 p.m., as the last light died, I opened the tin. Inside, an old iron key, and a folded letter in Gwilym's careful handwriting. "Tom, if you're reading this, I'm not there for the end. Sorry about that. Age catches us all, even stubborn old fools who think they're immortal." The key opens the crypt beneath the church. Yes, there's a crypt. I know we never mentioned it. It's been sealed since 1889, when the last burial happened there. But it's important. Trust me. Go inside. In the northeast corner, there's a stone tablet set into the floor. It's a boundary marker. The original one, from when this place was first settled. 7th century, near as anyone can date it. It's got inscriptions in Old Welsh that basically say, "Here we dwell. Here we hold. Here we remember." I need you to remove it. Crowbars in my shed. It'll take work, but you can do it. Take that tablet with you when you go. It's small enough. Maybe 2 feet square. Heavy, but manageable. That tablet is Brynmoor, Tom. The first memory. The foundation stone. Everything else might drown, but that stone needs to survive. Needs to be remembered. Needs to be kept by the keeper. Add it to the bone box collection. And someday, when you find the right place, the right time, you plant it somewhere new. You make a new boundary. A new beginning. That's what keepers do. They don't just preserve the past, they plant it in the future. Do this for me. For all of us. Gwilym. P.S. Don't forget the threshold sweeping. And say the words loud. The valley should hear them one last time. The church stood at the village's edge. Gothic revival. Built in 1823 on the site of something much older. I'd walked past it 100 times without really seeing it. Now, key in hand, I approached it like it was alive. The key worked. The door opened with a groan that seemed to echo across the empty valley. Inside, it was exactly as cold and dusty as you'd expect. I found the crypt entrance behind the altar. A stone trapdoor with an iron ring. It took all my strength to lift it, revealing narrow stairs descending into darkness. My phone's flashlight showed me a small chamber. Maybe 12 feet square. Stone walls slick with damp. And there, in the northeast corner, exactly as Gwilym had said, a carved stone tablet set into the floor. The crowbar was where he'd promised. I spent 2 hours working the tablet loose, levering it up bit by bit, my hands going numb with cold and effort. But finally, it came free. It was heavy. I'd guess 50 pounds. But manageable. The carving was almost worn away by time, but in my flashlight beam, I could just make out the old lettering, the angular script of a language long dead. Here we dwell. Here we hold. Here we remember. I cried then. Properly. Sitting in that ancient crypt with the foundation stone of Brynmoor in my lap. Because Gwilym was right. This was the heart of it. The first memory. And it was mine now. To keep. To carry. To plant somewhere new. Getting it up the stairs nearly killed me, but I managed. I wrapped it in blankets from Gwilym's cottage. Loaded it into my car with the bone box. Made sure both were secure. It was 11 p.m. 1 hour left. I did the threshold sweeping exactly as taught. Started at the back, worked forward, swept 700 years of dust out the front door. At the threshold, I spoke the Welsh words. My accent terrible but my intention clear. Hen flydyn Allen, blydyn newydd I main. Darcham wygor fennel, croesor ear difodal. Bod ear cartref hun vi cough. Old year out, new year in. Thanks for the past, welcome to the future. May this home live in memory. I locked the door. Put the key in my pocket. Stood in the center of Brynmoor one last time. Midnight came with no fanfare. Just the church bell. Rigged to ring automatically. Tolling 12 times into the darkness. And then silence. I sat at the cross until nearly 2 a.m. Just sitting, just being there. The last person in Brynmoor while it was still Brynmoor. Then I got in my car. The foundation stone and the bone box in the back seat. And I drove away. In my rearview mirror, the village disappeared into the Welsh night. And I didn't look back again. Chapter 7. The planting. 6 months later, I was living in Swansea, working an office job that paid significantly better than data entry, and bored me significantly more. I'd visited Gwilym twice. He was in a care home now, healing slowly, stubbornly refusing to accept that his mobility might never fully return. Have you planted it yet? He'd ask every time. The stone? Not yet, I'd admit. Haven't found the right place. You'll know when you do, he'd say. Trust your instincts. I kept the stone wrapped in my flat, propped in a corner of my bedroom. The bone box sat on my bookshelf. I'd added to it a program from the memory feast. A photograph I'd taken of the candlelit village during the solstice vigil. A piece of slate from Gwilym's roof. Keeping the tradition alive, in my own small way. In March, they flooded the valley. I couldn't watch, but I read about it. 3 weeks to fill, the newspapers said. A new reservoir. Economic opportunities. Wildlife habitat. Everything the council had promised. I dreamed about Brynmoor drowning. In April, on a restless Saturday, I drove out to see it. The reservoir was beautiful, I had to admit. Clear water, hills reflected perfectly, already attracting hikers and birdwatchers. I stood at the viewing point, trying to orient myself. The village cross would be there, 40 feet down. Gwilym's cottage there. The church there. All of it silent beneath the water. Disconnected. Drowned. But also still there. Still existing. In their way. Waiting. I noticed something odd. Near where I'd parked. Someone had cleared a patch of ground and planted a small garden. Wildflowers, native species, already blooming. A sign read, Brynmoor Memorial Garden. Planted by former residents. Never forgotten. Emma was there. Megan Parry's granddaughter. I recognized her from the memory feast. "Tom," she said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "Same as you, I think. Paying respects." We stood together, looking at the water. "I've been researching," Emma said. "My grandmother's stories. The village history. I'm thinking of writing a book about it. About places like Brynmoor. Communities that vanished but mattered. Would you talk to me? For the book?" "I'd like that," I said. And then, on impulse, "Have you got a minute? There's something I want to show you." I brought out the bone box from my car. Showed her the contents, told her what each piece meant. She listened with the same intensity her grandmother must have had. And I realized. Here was someone else who cared. Someone else who'd carry it forward. "I have something else," I said. And showed her the foundation stone. Her eyes widened. "Is that from the church?" "The crypt. 7th century. Gwilym made me promise to plant it somewhere. To make a new boundary, a new beginning. I just haven't figured out where." Emma looked at the memorial garden. Then back at me. "What about here? At the edge of the reservoir? The literal boundary of what was and what is." It was perfect. It took both of us to maneuver the stone from my car to the garden's edge. We found a spot overlooking the water, where you could see down into the valley on clear days. See the shadows of what lay beneath. We dug together, awkwardly, with a spade Emma borrowed from a maintenance shed. It took an hour. But finally, we'd carved out a space deep enough. "Should we say something?" Emma asked. "Some kind of ceremony?" I thought about it. Then pulled out my phone. Called Gwilym. "Tom." His voice was stronger than it had been. "What's happening?" "We're planting the stone," I said. "Thought you should be here." On speaker. I held up the phone. Emma and I, on either side of the foundation stone, about to lower it into Welsh soil once more. "Gwilym," I said. "Want to say the words?" And from the phone speaker, his voice clear and strong, he spoke the old blessing. "Hen flydyn Allen, blydyn newydd I main. Darcham wygor fennel, croesor i'r difodal. Yma rhaid dim unpreswilio. Yma rhaid dim undul. Yma rhaid dim uncoffio. Old year out, new year in. Thanks for the past, welcome to the future. Here we dwell. Here we hold. Here we remember." We lowered the stone into place. It sat there, solid and ancient, a boundary marker at the edge of drowned Brynmoor, the first stone of something new. "It's done," I told Gwilym. "The stone is planted." "Good lad." Was he crying? I think he was crying. "Good lad. Now it's not gone, is it? It's just waiting, growing, ready to be found by whoever needs it next." Emma was already planning. We could add more stones. Make a proper memorial. Tell the stories on plaques. Create a walking path that traces the old boundaries. Underwater now, but still there if you know where to look. "And I've got all of Gwilym's notes," I added. "The customs, the stories. We could preserve them properly. Make them accessible. A keeper's archive," Emma said, grinning. "I like it." Over the next year, that's exactly what we did. Emma wrote her book, Drowned Valleys. The Lost Villages of Wales, with a whole chapter on Brynmoor. I contributed research, photographs, transcriptions of the bone box contents. We created a website, digitized everything, made sure the stories were searchable, shareable, alive. The memorial garden grew. More stones were added, each carved with a name, a memory. The wildflowers spread. It became a place people visited, where they'd read the stories and look at the water and understand what had been lost and what had been saved. Gwilym died in October, peacefully, in his sleep. He was 85. At his funeral, 70 people came. Former residents, their children, people who'd read Emma's book, people whose only connection was caring about what he'd preserved. I spoke at the service. Told them about the bone box, about the foundation stone, about a man who'd refused to let his world die unmourned. He taught me, I said, that being a keeper isn't about stopping change. It's about making sure that when things change, we remember what came before. We carry it forward. We plant it where it can grow. After the funeral, Emma and I went to the reservoir. Stood at the foundation stone. Now the heart of a growing memorial. Think we're doing it right? I asked. What he wanted? I think, Emma said. We're doing exactly what keepers do. We're remembering. We're passing it on. We're making sure it matters. I thought about Gwilym's words. Someone who listens. Someone who remembers. Someone who cares enough to carry it forward, even when it seems pointless. It didn't seem pointless anymore. The next week, I got an email. A man in Cornwall, whose village was facing a similar compulsory purchase. He'd read Emma's book, found our website. Could we help? Did we know how to preserve what was about to be lost? I looked at the bone box on my shelf. At the digital archive we'd built. At the network we were creating of people who cared about remembering. And I replied, yes. We can help. Let me tell you about the customs of keeping. Because that's what keepers do. We listen. We remember. We carry it forward. And we plant it where it can grow. Epilogue. 10 years later, there are 14 memorial gardens scattered across Wales, each marking a flooded or demolished village. Each with a foundation stone, a bone box, a keeper. Emma's book became a series. I run workshops on preservation and memory. We've trained 47 keepers. People committed to making sure their community's stories survive. Last week, a teenager from Cardiff emailed. Her great-grandfather was from Brynmoor. She'd found our website, wanted to know more. Could she visit the memorial? I took her there on a Sunday. Showed her the foundation stone, told her the stories, explained the customs. It's all underwater, she said. Looking at the reservoir. Gone. No, I said. Just transformed. Look. I showed her the website. The photographs. The digitized bone box contents. Your great-grandfather's here. Lewis Davis, right? He's in 3 stories from the memory feast. His photographs in the archive. His memories preserved. Thanks to you, she said. Thanks to Gwilym, I corrected. I just listened. I just remembered. I just carried it forward. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, could you teach me? The customs, the keeping? I want to learn. And I heard myself say, exactly as Gwilym once had. Good lass. Let's begin. Because that's what keepers do. We listen. We remember. We teach. And the chain continues, unbroken, through time and water and change. Here we dwell. Here we hold. Here we remember. Always.